Thank you so much for joining me on this reading, the second reading of Rekiya&Z. My name is Mutia Badruddin. I am a Nigerian homeschooling mom and obstetrician currently living in Saudi Arabia. I'm also a writer and author. And Rekiya&Z is my latest book. It's a contemporary Islamic fiction centered in Nigeria. And yeah, today we're going to be reading about Zainuna, who is the second main character book. Now, Zainuna is the Z, obviously, from the name. And she was a character that was easy for me to write, in that I utilized a lot of the stereotypes of what people expect from a certain type of Muslim woman. So I put in some of those stereotypes. Then on the other hand, I wanted her to have her own personality, um, to make people realize, like, even though we might sometimes dress the same, we don't always have the same, problems or the same um, issues or the same perspectives, so to speak. So yeah, I kind of layered her in that if you contrast her with the second character of the book, she might come across as simple, but then when you start delving into the book, you find out that she's a lot more complex than she looks. Or at least that was my intention. I don't know if I actually got it right. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to start reading about Zainuna. And I'm going to read from two different selections. The first part is at the very beginning of the book, which is interestingly at, we're meeting Zainuna here at the time where she and Rekiya met for the first time as well. And then, yeah, let me just start from there. Rekiya and I met in my first term at Nura, an exclusive girls-only Muslim secondary school located on the outskirts of Ibadan. It had been an elite boarding facility that rarely admitted new students beyond the first year, and my admission as a day student in the fourth year had been a special concession from the proprietress for some never disclosed favor owed to my mother. I had been resentful that first term of being the new girl in a new school, although I had known that the move was inevitable for some time. Mommy had explained to me after her last unsuccessful encounter with the principal of the government school I had attended for my junior secondary. I knew I would have to move after middle school, after the final JSCE exams were done. Public school officials in the southwest of Nigeria maintained the colonial traditions of repressing religious rights of Muslim students. Refusing to let girls wear hijab was just one of their tactics. They uphold frantically the legacy of the not so distant past when the colonial masters and coerced mandated the coerced conversion of Muslim children in exchange for basic education. Things were only marginally better even in the 1990s, and my parents had tried in the 3 years I was there to gain a concession to modify the uniform more modestly and to allow me to wear hijab, but in the end, they gave up. It hadn't helped that most of the girls in Nora had been there for the past 3 years, living together for the majority of that time, that they had settled into well defined roles in the drama of high school social, which I had to navigate my way through clueless. My status, or lack of one, as a day student, and one with evidently middle class roots, had made it obvious that I was not going to be a social success in my new school. Not that I had been one in my previous school. There, in the government run single sex school, I had been the Muslim girl, a niche that had been carved for me before I appreciated that I was being labeled. Everyone seemed to know that I donned my hijab as soon as I stepped out of the school gates and that I didn't do boys, music, or parties. And my mother, the fully veiled Muslim woman who never missed a school event, was just as well known. I had been the de facto girl called upon on Fridays to pray at the assembly. The one the one day a week when the Muslim prayers were used for the morning devotionals. And in Ramadan, which was about the 1 month a year when most Nigerian Muslims suddenly took cognizance of their religion. I had random girls walking up to me to ask, "Can I do this in Ramadan?" But at Nura, I found myself amid Muslim girls, all of whom were regulated to wear headscarves, pray 5 times a day, and memorize the Quran, at least in part. Yet I was bereft. I couldn't seem to fit in. An introvert by nature and nurture, making friends had never been my forte. And teenage girls are not known for being the nicest of population. I had a particularly hard time one day, and it all seemed too much. Classes were over, and the other girls had gone to their hostels. I should have headed to the school gates, but I sat in my empty classroom, crying over something so inconsequential I do not remember what it was anymore. All I remember is that I was crying, my teenage eyes out, and Rekiya walked in. I'd seen her before, of course. She was the Hausa girl with the rich Yoruba father, but our paths never crossed. She was a commercial student, and I was in the sciences. She had a horde of very popular friends, the girls who wore their regulated headscarves with as minimal covering but as much fashion statement as they could get away with, whose conversations revolved around boys and parties and celebrity gossip. They were the self-appointed top of the social ladder. I, on the other hand, was the friendless new girl who had not even merited a place on the said ladder. I had been mortified when she walked in on my pity party, and after an initial startled glance, I kept my head down and tried to control the sobs, if not the tears streaming down my face. Being found in such an ignominious condition only compounded my humiliation, and I wept harder, quietly. It was a while later before I realized that Rikia had not left like I expected her to. She had been standing over me the entire time, silent. She did not ask what the matter was, did not offer any comfort. She just stood there with a blank expression that was so unfamiliar to me. In my world, consisting mainly of teenage girls, everyone felt everything, and they had no reason to hide said feelings from anyone. And growing up in Ibadan, where the average stranger on the street was not shy to tell you exactly how they feel when they felt it strongly enough, it was an unnerving expression to see. It was yet another reminder of how difficult I was from this girl standing before me, all that she was, all that I could never hope to be. And I felt myself morphing from self pity and mortification to anger and defensiveness. What? You never get the urge just to cry? I asked her. I eyed her balefully. No. The quiet response was so unexpected. I did not know what to say. Majorly because the question had been rhetorical. I'd expected return bravado, a mollifying platitude, evasion, or awkward silence, not an answer. But who on earth does not cry? I mean, obviously, not in public places where you can make an embarrassing spectacle of yourself, but no. And if by some superpower that was true, who goes around saying that to the girl that had just had a cringe-worthy cry fest, witnessed by the much cooler and not a friend girl? Crying is a luxury affordable only if you have someone to console you. Ricky had settled into the seat across from me. I eyed her again. There was something vaguely sad about her words, though I couldn't put my finger on it. She met my eyes briefly, then looked away. My father left when I was 8, she said, her gaze, her blank gaze settling somewhere above my head. I haven't seen him since. A year after he left, my mother sent me here and got married. So no, I do not cry. Right, so that's the end of the first selection. And in this scene, we see Zainuna's thoughts when she was meeting Rekiya for the very first time. Now, the second selection is, so it's not a memory, it's something that's just happening in the present at the book. It's the beginning of the seventh chapter of the book. That's page 93 because some people say they like to read along. And here again, we see Rekiya meeting somebody, and we see Zainuna, sorry. We see Zainuna meeting somebody else. And this time, okay, I'm just going to read. Unlike most of my university friends, who were often the only practicing Muslims in the scene of whatever process passed for spousal searching amidst undergraduate Nigerian Muslim population, with a professor and a member of the University Muslim Community Board of Trustees for a father, and my very stern-faced PhD student of a brother, most of the MSSN brothers stayed clear of me. Now, MSSN is the Muslim Society. It's the umbrella body for Muslims in Muslim students, usually on the university campuses. And sorry for that. I'm just going to continue. Not for Professor Sanusi's daughter, any of the numerous offers of courtship by brothers who were in no way ready for marriage. I had always thought it amusing and it had bit disheartening, the Jambite rush, MSS style, that goes on amongst students at the various universities, overwhelming the newly admitted or newly reconnected with the dean female students with proposals of dubious relationships, often termed courtships, well before they've had time to grow into themselves as students, as women, as Muslims. For me, life went on pretty unencumbered and unconcerned, with the blithe certainty that when the time was right, my family would figure largely in the process of finding me a spouse. When mommy finally raised the topic, I was 20 and in my third year at the university. I remember my puzzlement when she asked if I had given any thought to getting married. Not really, I said. It wasn't exactly a lie. There was a twinkle of amusement in her eyes. So, no brothers have caught your eye, not even among those who have been visiting Daddy and Musa recently. Understanding had dawned, bringing mortification in its wake. Subhanallah, is that what they've been doing? Mommy nodded, laughing outright. I cringed, suddenly remembering the surge in young men visitors that had been in the house recently. It had seemed odd to me that the men had taken to entertaining inside the living room. The patio had always been the place where they hosted non-family male visitors in the past, but I had attributed the new turn of events to the heat wave we were currently experiencing. What did they do? I wailed, embarrassed by the thought of all those men. Announced that they had a sister, a daughter to marry off. Mommy was still smiling. Should mothers enjoy their daughters' discomfiture so much? I don't think so. I think they just invited eligible men over, hoping one would catch your fancy. I couldn't believe it. Why didn't they just say something? They are men, baby. Mommy shrugged, as though this explained everything or anything. And I'm saying it now. Yeah, after daddy asked you to have the embarrassing talk with your clueless daughter, I'm sure. I grumbled. She did not deny it. She just watched me with the steady, unnerving gaze that mothers have used to keep their children in line since time began. I closed my eyes, partly to escape the said gaze and partly to marshal my thoughts. I know how my parents operated. This was a negotiation, and I needed to make my terms clear and unambiguous. As for Musa, I would deal with that high-handed traitor later. I want prior knowledge. I want to be told something about the man before he comes, and to be informed of when he is expected. Mommy nodded solemnly, eyes still twinkling. I want to be in the room. Not, I quickly clarified as she moved to curtain, not in the living room, but if they leave the door open and the curtains drawn, I can listen in on the conversation from the dining room to get an idea of what kind of man. Anything else? Mommy interrupted. I shake my head. You will not ask to see them? Oh, I plan to be by the window, I replied saucily. You know, the one that overlooks the gate. Even as an undergraduate, I'd lived at home. I could have lived in one of the student hostels, at least for some of my years of study. But the idea of sharing cramped living quarters with any number of strange girls from all walks of life held no appeal for me. I would. It helped that we lived just a bus drop away from the university campus, and commuting with my father on most days saved me the hassle of braving the Ibadan public transportation system. The first day he came to our house, Yusuf Alimi had not come as a potential suitor, nor had my men folk set him up with a spurious excuse of an invitation for me to look him over. He had been newly returned to the country from Cairo, where he had studied at Al Hadar, and he was looking for my brother Musa. They had spent some months together in Egypt a few years before, while my brother was obtaining his Ijaza certification for the memorization of the Quran. I had been the one to receive him, and that first encounter, short and barely memorable, had intrigued me whenever my brother would mention him thereafter. Months went by. Yusuf and my brother grew closer. Their friendship solidified, especially when my father's influence helped them both get assistant lecturer positions at the university. And one day, Musa let it slip that Yusuf saw his lecturing job as a means to his dream of opening a madrasa. His goal was to help people study the deen of Allah and not to pay politics of an academic career in the Arabic and Islamic Studies department. That was the day I admitted the truth to myself. I wanted to marry Yusuf Ali. He was everything I wanted in a man. His knowledge and passion about the deen were obvious, as was his sincerity. Musa, my brother, Musa, sorry, and my brother could be voluble despite his stern and boorish nature. Was full of stories about his kindness and honor and patience and general good manners in all circumstances. His father had died when he was 7 years old, and his mother had done her best to raise him and her own two much younger sisters. To hear Musa tell it, Yusuf Alimi thought the world of his women folk. It did not matter to me that he was not educated in the typical Western style. Placed in the madrasa route from childhood, he had spent most of his life learning the various branches of Islamic studies, and it was only after he was awarded scholarship to study at Al Azhar that he learned English through self study. Honestly, that incidental meeting with him was the first time I had any inkling to what all those Victorian novels I had devoured childhood alluded to. I actually felt the butterflies in the tummy, fluttering sensation I had previously been sure was just a gimmick to sell their tales to gullible and unsuspecting females. It had been hard to keep my gaze lowered in my curb and my voice steady in the few moments it took me to answer the door and inform him of my brother's absence. It was even harder feigning disinterest in my brother's friend, as Musa and Daddy helped him to settle in his life back in the country, because in time he slowly became entrenched in my family's life. As a girl, I considered the story of Khadija's proposal to the Prophet ﷺ incredibly romantic. I sigh over it in the way the romance novels I devoured were never able to make me do. But in real life, as the young woman, sorry, now discreetly mooning over her brother's best friend, the idea of being the one to initiate a marriage inquiry did not hold much appeal for me. What if he didn't want me? Would he be too shy of my father and my brother to say no? And would he then resent me after marriage? And what if he did say no? Oh, the notification. And how would that affect his relationship with my brother and my father? What if he already had somebody else in mind? What if he just did not want me? Eventually, I did not have to do anything. Mommy guessed my mind, and she put her husband to work. And when Daddy told me he had found a groom, not a suitor for me, it was all that I could do to smile demurely when he mentioned Yusuf's name. Our official sit down had been more of a formality. We were supposed to discuss issues that we deemed important with the aim of ascertaining our compatibility. but neither of us raised any serious topics. We spent the half hour in loaded silence, broken only by the occasional question and answer, trading shy glances with smiling eyes. It was apparent that both our minds was made up long before that meeting. He never even asked to see my face. For several honeymoon years, I thought that had been incredibly romantic too. And yeah, so this is where I'm going to stop on the selection. This is two portions that I selected to read on Rekiya and Z. And if anybody has any questions, this will be the time to do that, inshallah. Thank you so much for joining me.